everyone, this is Joe from Scarecrow Joe's Studio. Welcome back to the Haunted Coffin House paper mache tutorial. And this final segment, part 5, we're going to finish this up. We're going to paint it, attach our separate elements to it that we've created with polymer clay and some other different things. And then we're going to seal it. So let's get started, but before we do, let's go over tools and materials that you're going to need to complete your project. Okay, tools and materials that you're going to need today. Obviously, you're going to need some paint. In whatever variety of colors that you choose to paint your coffin house. I'm mostly going to be using some grays, browns, orange to paint my little pumpkins here that I created out of polymer clay. I'm going to need white, and I'm definitely going to need black. The other thing that you're going to need is you're going to want to seal your project after it's completed. So I suggest getting a can of fast-drying polyurethane. I get this clear satin because it doesn't have that much of a gloss to it. But if you want your project to look glossy, you can go ahead and get the gloss. But you will want something to seal it with after you complete it. Complete the painting process. And of course, you're going to need some various sizes of paintbrushes. And then if you did, go ahead and create your little, whether it's tombstones or little jack-o'-lanterns or pumpkins, you'll want those. You're going to want to get those painted off. And then if you are planning on using any kind of moss or ground cover a little bit around your coffin house, you're going to need that. And along those lines, you will need some kind of adhesive other than hot glue. So any kind of a white glue or Mod Podge glue, anything like that will help. And that's just to secure your pieces of moss or your mulch or any of those other things that you want to put on there as ground cover. Now, as far as the jack-o'-lanterns are concerned, you don't need to permanently attach them. You can leave them off, and then that way, you could reposition them, set them anywhere you want. I'm probably going to permanently attach mine in some way. All right, so I think that's about it. I hope I didn't leave anything else out. First thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this off camera here, because I don't think you need to watch me do this. I'm going to paint the entire thing. Except for the tree and the windows. I'm going to paint the entire thing in black. I'm going to use an acrylic black. And then after that, I'm going to dry brush some acrylic white onto it. All right, I have completed the process of basing out my my sculpture here in black paint. It is completely dry. It may look a little glossy to you. The reason for that is because the only black paint that I really had was a black gloss acrylic, which is fine. I normally will not use a gloss, but it's fine because the white that I'm going to dry brush over this is going to knock that gloss down quite a bit. For those of you who are not familiar with dry brushing, it's very basic. So what I'm going to do here is I have a few sheets of newspaper, and I've squirted some white acrylic paint onto that. I have a basic, this is a 1-inch chip brush here, and I've cut down the bristles. I like to use these that are cut down so I have a little bit more control when I do dry brushing. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip a little bit of my brush into my paint, and then I'm going to knock off that paint onto the newspaper. You're not going to need very much of the white paint, so just keep that in mind. And I'm going to start on the back. I like to start on the back of sculptures when I start dry brushing, just in case I get too much paint on it. So I'm going to start on the back, and I'm just going to start basically the rocks, the back part of it here. And as you can see, I'm not forcing my brush with the white paint in between the crevices of these rocks. I want that to just kind of fall to black. So the dry brush technique is basically it's picking up anything that's raised, any raised area. So now that I know the amount of paint I need to complete my dry brush, I can go ahead and I'm just going to continue on here and dry brush the entire thing, except for, of course, the windows. I'm not going to paint the windows, and I'm not going to paint this tree either. So I'm just going to dry brush the rest of it, the entire thing. Rule of thumb, so when you have a pattern, so I don't know if you could still see the pattern in here where I drew in, or I pressed in into the wet clay to make it look like planks of wood, so they're going this way. So to pick up a lot of that pattern or texture, go against the grain, I guess, is what I would say. That way you could see where all of these recessed portions of this are staying darker. They're kind of fading to black. And now you could see some of the areas where I've concentrated on and I've pressed in some more texture, where you have these little areas where I pressed in some like little knots or holes in the wood. So that's going to bring all of that out. So that's what's really cool about this technique. You could see here how it's bringing out, hopefully you could see how it's bringing out the texture. So you're going to go ahead, I would start on the back, and then you don't really need to put a whole lot of white on there. If you get a little bit of more white in certain areas, like I kind of did in a couple of areas here, it's not a big deal, because you're going to be covering up most of this white with your other colors that you're going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and carry on here, finish up my dry brush, and then once that is dry, I'll come back and actually start my painting process. Right, dry brush here is complete over my black base coat. So I'm going to go ahead, and you could see here how it really brought out the texture in the paper mache clay. I'm going to go ahead and continue on with my painting. I'm really about to get started here in the actual painting and get this thing completed. I'm going to use some nutmeg brown. I'm going to start with some nutmeg brown. Again, I'm using some newspaper as my little paint palette. And I'm going to start with the back, once again, the back of my coffin house. And similar to the dry brush effect, I'm knocking off some of the paint. And I'm going to go ahead and, again, very lightly just start painting. And I'm going to use this nutmeg brown color and paint over the entire coffin house, except, of course, the insides of these windows. And I'm also going to use that to I'm going to paint in the roots here of my tree. And then when I brought up the paper mache clay onto my my tree trunk, I'm going to go ahead and paint those areas with this nutmeg brown as well. So that's going to be my my start of actually getting this thing painted out. And as I am painting, again, I'm going to go vertical with anything that has a horizontal lines or texture to it. And as you can see, there's some of that white dry brush and some of that black base coat that is still peeking through, and that's exactly what I want, because I want this to look aged. So I'm going to flip it, turn it, and if something again is horizontally textured, I'm going to paint vertically, so against the grain, so to speak. So I've completed the tops, the sides, the back. I'm carrying on with the front now. I'm going to try not to get so much of this nutmeg brown paint onto my stones here. If I do happen to get a little bit on there, I'm not going to worry about it. It's completely fine. But I don't want my stones to be brown. They're going to be a grayish, sort of a granite feel to them, which they already kind of look that way with the black, as you can see with that black base coat, and then the white dry brush over them. All right, now as you can see, once again, it's retaining the texture by using this technique. For my ground, because I have this same color, what I'm going to do for my ground around the base here, I'm going to go ahead and do some paint all of that. Try not to get a whole bunch of that paint again on my little rocks for my staircase or rocks around my base. But again, if I happen to get some brown paint on those areas, not a big deal. Now I have two other colors, or different types of colors of browns. I have a burnt umber, which is going to be a darker brown than that nutmeg brown. And then I also have a burnt sienna. And I'm going to use these to put in some little highlights and things in my coffin house. And maybe even my tree. I'm going to go ahead, and this painting process shouldn't take you long. We're going to speed right through this. It's acrylic paint. If you're using acrylic paint, it's going to dry pretty fast. When you're working on these things, you don't have to, once you get past the the base coat black and the dry brush, you do not have to sit and wait for it to dry, because it dries pretty quick, and then you want to kind of blend some of it. So that's what I'm doing. And in fact, I'm even on my nutmeg, where my palette is here, I'm just putting some of that, I'm sorry, not nutmeg, the burnt umber, a little bit of that right over the paint palette there. With the light that I have going on, it looks like one side is darker. That's just the shadow of the tree. So it's pretty evenly coated. So again, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use a smaller brush for my highlights here. And I'm just going to, like, just in various little places, kind of, I don't want to cover the whole thing, but I want to break it up a little bit with this burnt umber. This is darker brown. So I'm not trying to cover the whole thing. I'm just in various areas just kind of putting in some of that darker paint. It's going to add more depth to your piece. And it's also going to make it look a little bit more aged, in my opinion. I'm probably just going to go ahead and darken up the frame here around my windows. Make those stand out a little bit more with that darker brown. It's going to go around the little door window here. And I'm going to go ahead and put some of these darker areas in. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same with the sides, the back of it. Just put in some darker highlights. Well, I guess if they're darker, they're probably considered lowlights. But I think you understand. Alright, so I added some of the darker burnt umber. And I did go all the way around my edges here as well with the burnt umber. I did the back of it, I did the sides, hit hit some of the areas. So this is what it's starting to look like now. I also went over my paper mache areas on my tree here, where the roots, I darkened those up. Last thing I want to do for my coffin house here is I have, again, the burnt sienna. This is acrylic. I don't need much of it. I'm going to go ahead and use another smaller brush. Just like that. And very little paint. I'm knocking it off. Knocking most of it off. And again, I'm just going to go in and very, very lightly put in some of this burnt sienna. You could tell the different. Well, if I turn it like this, you can kind of tell the difference here. I don't want to overdo it. But I think that again, this brings out even more of the texture and adds depth and kind of like an aged sort of a look to the wood of your coffin house. We'll go ahead and do some on the door to bring out my little area there where where it would be like a doorknob. I'm going to highlight that a little bit more excessively. And then, if you ever feel like you've gotten too much on there, go ahead and go over it with some of the darker brown. But I would suggest waiting until your piece, you've got your piece dried. Let that acrylic dry on there before you make any kind of assessments and wanting to go over anything, darken anything, or lighten anything, because your paint, it's going to change when it dries. It won't look the way it looks when it's wet. So I suggest letting it dry completely and then, reassess the areas that you feel might need a little bit more attention. And you can also, as you're going, if you think you've got too much in an area, use your finger or a paper towel or something, and you could just kind of rub it off a bit. Especially around these areas where I have these knots or these gouges that I've kind of gouged out a little bit. I want to bring that out a little bit more. So I'm going to highlight those areas with this burnt sienna reddish brown color here. I'm not going to get too crazy with it, but again, I just want to add a little bit here and there to bring out some more depth. Alright, I think that's going to be a wrap for painting the coffin house itself. Now I can go ahead and move on to painting my stones and my stone staircase and these stones around here. Shift gears and focused on our rocks. I did end up getting quite a bit of my brown paint on some of these rocks up here. Like I said, that's not a big deal though. I'm going to go ahead and choose a smaller brush again because I'm going to hit these. And this is just, again, sheet of newspaper, and I have some gray acrylic paint here. And again, I'm going to go ahead and knock off some of it, and I'm going to start with the top one here because it does have all that brown on it. I want to kind of get rid of that. This might be a little bit too light. I'm going to let it dry before I add any more. Color to these stones. I'm really just more concerned in covering up the brown that I very sloppily put on there. I like already the way that the stones and the stone steps where I didn't get brown on them look naturally, because with that black base coat and then the white dry brush, it already looks like granite. But I just want to I'm going in with a little bit of this gray paint, and again I'm just adding more colorization to it, darkening it, making that white not stand out so white, toning it down a bit basically. Not really concerned in trying to get in between there. I'm kind of like, I want to leave that sort of a darker color in between the creases of the steps. Let some of that black really come through. So you can see this technique, how it's just a really, really cool technique to use when painting any kind of stones that you want to have like a granite color. Just going to hit these little rocks. Like you can tell that I'm not forcing my paintbrush in the crevices. I want that to fade and around these in the crevices here. I want it to remain dark, just kind of fade to black. Again, I'm going to go in around my base with these rocks. I don't need to get crazy with it. I just really am covering up those areas where I got a lot of the brown paint on there, knocking that off, covering it up with the gray. But as you can see, I'm not trying to paint the entire stone. I want some of that white to come through. I definitely want that black to remain coming through. Again, painting and painting paper mache, it's all about adding your colorization so that it adds depth to your piece. And if you've done a really good job in your texture, and with this type of paper mache clay, you don't have to work really hard to get that texture, because that's the type of material with the paper fibers. It naturally is texturized, so it works great for this type of art. Just about done with my stones here, and then I'm going to let that dry and come back to it, reevaluate. Look at my coffin house to see if I'm pleased with the color after it has dried. But so far, I'm liking it. So far, so good. You could go ahead and paint, you could paint your tree completely a different color if you want. I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it the natural colorization that it has from the wood. And then as you could see, when I attached it permanently with the paper mache clay, some of that paste got onto what is the trunk of my tree. It kind of turned it a little whitish color. I like that effect. I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to paint it. But this is what it looks like so far. I'm pleased with that. Again, I'm going to let it dry completely. I'm going to give it about an hour, and then I'll come back to it, take a look. And I think in that time frame, what I'm going to do while I'm waiting for that to dry is I'm going to go ahead and start painting my little jack-o'-lanterns. Alright, so I've allowed this to dry for approximately 45 minutes. I could do some more work on this. I could certainly bring out the texture even more, put in on some different shades of gray on my rocks, even my coffin house. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to call it done. It looks good. I mean, I'm pleased with it. It looks good. But before I move on to anything else, I have started painting my little pumpkins. These are drying. The pumpkin color that I've used, or the color of orange, is Harvest Orange. Again, it's an acrylic. And then once that dries, I'm just going to go in and do some brown stems, probably with the nutmeg brown. And then with the ones that I do have the jack-o'-lantern face, I'm just going to go in with those areas there and, put some black in there in those openings so that they stand out a bit. So I'm just waiting for these little pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns out of Sculpey clay that I've created, waiting for those to dry. So while I'm doing that, I do want to talk about different types of decorations. We've created some, maybe you've made some tombstones, but there are a number of other little things that you could do with this. I haven't put my moss or anything else on for ground cover yet. That's going to be next. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you a few things. If you have some characters, some favorite Halloween type characters from movies or whatnot, like these here, you don't have to permanently attach them, but you could use them, to decorate your piece. So we've got two of my favorite characters here that I can use. I will not permanently attach them, but I could certainly use them. Maybe you have some spiders, some Halloween spiders. You can have like a big spider, at the top of your coffin house, or maybe on the back, and you can attach spiders and things like that. Or, you can buy pick up these really cheap little, or you can even make these out of Sculpey clay yourself. This is just a very rudimentary little bat. It has a string on it here, but you can even attach something like that, maybe to the tree, hang it on your little tree, or skulls. If you have little skulls, you can use skulls as your decorations too. I have a giant skull, so maybe you could put a giant skull up on top. I mean, any kind of thing like that. Or get rid of that guy, and maybe you want maybe you have a skeleton here. This little guy who's came on a string of all of these little skeletons. So I would just trim that off and maybe attach that somewhere, possibly, hanging off of the side here. And if you have, he's not to scale, as far as this particular coffin house miniature is concerned, but if you made a bigger one, or if you had a smaller one, and if you don't even care about scale, maybe you wanted a giant type of a skeleton hanging out or something, you could certainly do that. Jack here, he would definitely have to duck if he was walking through that door. But you get what I'm saying. There are so many different things that you could implement here in your piece. Whether you create them out of polymer clay, or you buy these little things at maybe a dollar store, or you have some favorite characters that you would like to incorporate in your piece. So you can really, really make it great. So next step is I'm going to go ahead and get some white glue. That's all I'm going to use. I'm going to smear some white glue over the top of my base here, and I'm going to attach some of my moss and some of my mulch or ground cover that I've collected. So what I have here, this is just some Elmer's white glue. You can use any kind of white glue. I like using the white glue because it dries clear when it does dry. So what I'm going to do is, before I do that, I'm going to show you I've broken up my pieces of moss here, because I don't want giant clumps of it. And I'm going to, kind of strategically place them. And then I have these little pieces of, this is just like ground mulch. You can use sand too to kind of fill in your areas, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to go ahead and with an old paintbrush that I don't care about, I'm just going to brush on the surface here all around. And if I don't end up attaching moss to certain areas again, because I'm using the white glue, it's not going to matter, because it's going to dry clear, and it's going to be perfectly fine. But since I don't know exactly where I'm going to be placing this stuff until I get in here and start doing it, I'm just slathering it on pretty much all over the base. Probably won't do so much to the back of the piece. The back of the piece is not, obviously it's not a focal point. But I might put something in there. I'm not sure. All right, so starting to work here before it starts drying. I'm just going to go ahead and start attaching my moss, some of my my little pieces of mulch here. The other thing that I'm not concerned about is if it doesn't stick completely, because the spray polyurethane is actually going to help this also to adhere to the base. I don't really want to cover up too much of my roots that I worked so hard on implementing there, but I'm going to put some of that moss around there. More pieces of the mulch here. So anyway, there you have it. That's pretty much my my moss, my ground cover. I'm just gonna press it down, make sure that it's gonna adhere. If some of it isn't adhering, it will. One of the things that's really, really great about using that spray can of polyurethane is that, of course, it can also act as a sort of an adhesive as well. The fast drying polyurethane. So once this does dry completely, and again, gonna finish up painting my little pumpkins. Once those are dry completely, I'll go ahead and attach those using some glue. And after everything is dry, I'm going to spray the entire thing with this fast drying polyurethane. I will have to take it outside to do that because of the fumes. And then that's going to be it for this project. But all right, everyone, I have completed my haunted paper mache coffin house. I attached all my little separate elements here. I did choose to I've got a couple little, I don't know if you could see them, but I do have a couple little skulls in there. I've got a bigger one here in the back. I have my little Sculpey clay jack-o'-lanterns and pumpkins that I've attached. I have my little dollar store Halloween tree ornament and bat there hanging on my tree. And I did decide to attach the giant spider. I thought it looked pretty cool. But this is what it looks like. The result of the finished project here. The way that I ended up attaching these separate elements, the spider, the little skulls, and the jack-o'-lanterns, I used some Loctite glue instead of just using hot glue or school glue like Elmer's glue. This is going to ensure that these things are not going to fall off. Step was to spray the entire thing, including the little windows. It's not going to make a difference. You're going to spray the entire thing with the fast drying polyurethane, some clear satin. I did not do that yet because it is raining here where I live. And I don't use any kind of aerosols or anything like that inside my studio because I don't have the proper ventilation. So I will have to wait until the rain lets up and I can take this outdoors and spray it and let it dry, and then it'll be completely done. But that's pretty much it. Let me spin this around so you could take a look at the back. Back in here, I did insert a light You can, you can insert a little tea light like this, an LED electronic tea light. A strand of lights is what I have in there that changes different colors. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dim these lights and turn on the light on the inside of my coffin house here to give you an idea of how that looks when it's lit up from the inside. So yeah, just to give you an idea, this is what it looks like when the lights are dim, and the little strand of lights that I have, it's a multicolored kind of a light. I could use different colors or settings. That's how it looks. Let me change the setting real quick here. So it's really nice if you could get a strand of lights that changes colors, flashes in different increments, that kind of thing. There's there's that other setting here where it's different colors. Hopefully you can see that where it is changing colors a little bit. Yeah, that's how it looks. Alright guys, well that's a wrap on the paper mache miniature haunted coffin house tutorial. If you have followed along and completed your project, I'd love to see your work and how you really were creative in your design and made it your own. So if you'd like to share that with me, you can email me your photos to scarecrowjos@gmail.com. That's Scarecrow and then JOS@gmail.com, and I'll also add that in the description of the video as well. Thank you for watching, as always, and we'll catch you in the next one.